Thank you for calling. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that sovereignty is very important. However, it's not everything, it's not absolute. As long as government is not capable to help the people, well, we do believe we must take this proposal to help the innocent citizen, which got a harm under the national disaster as much as possible. Well, first of all, from the Prime Minister, let me move on to definition. This definition is so clear. First of all, United Nations from the national disaster, and two, United Nations Security Council tell the government which maybe to defeat the order to enter this country to help the citizen as much as possible and ASAP. And if this kind of country never obey this order, the United Nations Security Council will give the military sanction, and the way is totally same as another cases from the United States or Germany. The law by composed by such kind of country will give the military to give the emergency aid for this country. After to help to protect them, the United Nations Security Council such kind of military withdraw from there. Today I had 2 points. First of all, I will talk about why the sovereignty is not everything, why it is not absolutely. Two, how practically this proposal will help the innocent citizen, and after this proposal, no so harm will happen. And if you compare the number to help it or the casualty which is made by maybe the battle from the United States Security Council military sanction to their country like Myanmar. Well, first of all, we're going to one. The sovereignty wide is not everything. We know that having consent is very, very important to negotiate, to have a relationship with all country. But we think the sovereignty never come out from nowhere. We do believe sovereignty is made by entrancement by the people. The people support this government. That's why government can govern this country itself. That's why as long as the government betray the citizen, this government doesn't have any sovereignty to govern this country itself. Well, like the case of economic sanction, when the government never help to protect the citizen, even they're so poor, even the national disaster or so forth, well, in such a situation, United Nations give the economic sanction such kind of country which never protect the citizen. And what's more, even the government on military regime abuse the human rights, United Nations Security Council will give the military sanction towards such kind of country. That is why we say sovereignty is not everything. Sovereignty is not absolutely. Sometimes we can forget it to protect the innocent citizen. No. Next, we go on to the practical matter. But first of all, let me talk about how the status quo is so miserable and it's so huge harm on the innocent citizen and the country governed by militarism like Myanmar. Well, we do believe natural disaster is simply it killed many people in simple reasoning, but because of disaster. And what's more, most importantly, by the disaster, their basis of life will be collapsed perfectly, like Myanmar, because of hurricane, typhoon, something else. Well, will kill will break the infrastructure in Myanmar, the basis of the field to make the cloth, infrastructure of water, gather electricity, and anything else. Well, that is why, first of all, it's so harmful, and what's more, this kind of infrastructure will go down. It's simply the citizens' quality life will go down. And what's more, after that, the people's workforce will be weakened, must be weakened, because without infrastructure, their basis of life will go down, because they must shift for the first industry more and more. Simply in the long term and short term, this kind of disaster is so harmful. That is why we have to help them. Well, in this situation, maybe they say the big casualty which is made of a battle is much than the people will be helped by this proposal, but we don't think so. And simply, no. just a moment. Well, for this, in order to protect, in order to enter this country, first of all, we already say that, first of all, order this country to help the citizen as much as possible. If this country help them, no problem at all. And two, even though they, just a moment, sorry, even though if the government defeat this order, to try to defeat order, they will think if they defeat the order, it's simply military sanction comes on, and also this military sanction might kill their status itself. That is why simply all they should do is quite simple: to welcome the United Security Council and to allow to distribute emergency aid for a poor person without any cost. In simply, that is why we say before having conflict, there's no problem at all. Opening.
So if you think that this aid is so wonderful, if there's no harm attached to providing this aid, then why would these local government decide to reject this aid in the first place?
It's simply they are afraid to invade it, but their sovereignty or change the military regime or so forth. But simply all we want to do is quite simple to help the citizen, and even though we send ODAs, this kind of money is used for the top the military regime or so forth. This kind of money never goes to the innocent citizens so directly. That is why sending ODA never means. Well, after even if the battle will be happen, there's no problem at all. Of course, we know that some of the casualty will be happen, but first of all, quickly we can defeat this military regime by using international United States military sanction is so huge if we compare with the countries such kind of military regime. And what's more, their basis it means the tax or labor forces will go down because of natural disaster. It's so difficult to defeat and also difficult to have in the long-term battle or so forth. And finally, even though the casualty will be happen, this kind of soldier is part of state. It means they are part of axis or evil. That is why no problem to having a problem, even though we have it. That's why let me please compare the person will be killed by battle. There is so innocent and number is so little, and to help this amount of tons of person will be helped with this proposal. We must take the proposal. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister. Next, I'd like to call upon the Leader of Opposition, Mr. Kazushige Yoshimaru, to deliver your speech within 7 minutes.
Madam Speaker, when natural disaster happened in Burma, the United States actively intervened to deliver aid to Burmese people without the consent of the local government. And what happened is that this Burma tries to shoot down the aircraft of the United States because Burma did not like the US to come in the first place. That kind of dangerous situation can happen only when these Western countries intervene without the consent. What we stand behind in today's debate is the ASEAN way, where ASEAN model, where ASEAN tried to secure the consent of Burmese government in negotiation and actually successfully secured the consent and intervened to deliver the negotiation. We believe that a delivery of emergency aid can be provided in a maximum way when there is a consent of the local government, and this is what we stand behind. In my speech, I'm going to talk about 2 points. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the importance of consent of local government and how local government is the best actor to deliver aid. But secondly, I'm going to talk about how the local government will start to reject the aid from Western nations after taking this proposal, and how that leads to exacerbate the situation on the ground. But before that, let's deal with the Prime Minister's argument. First of all, what we had is a government sovereignty is not absolute, right? Of course, we consider that sovereignty is not absolute. The debate here is whether which side leads to the better situation on the ground when emergency happens and when intervention has to happen. And but more about what we say is that we should not forget, like ASEAN way, we successfully secure the consent of Burmese government in negotiation, while there are countries like the United States which intervene without the consent. We believe that this policy undermines the actual effort from the international society to gain the consent from local government, which we believe leads to more exacerbated situation on the ground. Secondly, what we heard is that this local government will comply to the Western nations because there exists a technological superiority in Western countries. Well, look at Vietnam War. Even though the United States has far more sophisticated technology, we believe that it didn't work. No thinking. The reason for that is that local government has there is asymmetrical information between local government and Western countries, and this is exactly what I'm going to talk about in my first argument. Well, let's look at our first argument, which is about the importance of consent and why local government is the best actor to deliver aid. We believe that delivery of emergency aid works in a maximum way when consent of the local government exists. And we believe that lack of consent undermines the delivery of aid for 2 reasons. Firstly, we believe that there is asymmetrical information between local government and Western states, right? Even when Western countries like the United States uses a technology like satellite services, they cannot tell how many people are living in which area in these countries. And this is why, when the United States intervene in Burma without the consent, they actually airdrop the aid, in wrong places, right? In places where people actually do not exist or people barely exist, and that leads to the waste. We believe that actually was a waste of precious resources of aid that could potentially save far more number of people. No, thank you. But second reason is that there is asymmetrical information between the Western countries and local people, right? When natural disaster happened in Burma and United States, even though United States delivered certain amount of aid to the people on the ground, what happened is that people actually could not use these resources because people did not know how to use Western medicine, right? Because there is cultural differences, and this instruction is written in different languages. No, thank you. There are actually thousands of Burmese people who actually who could not be saved due to this asymmetrical information. On the contrary, no, thank you. What happens when local governments convey the aid when consent of the local government exists? We believe that, firstly, we believe that given that this local government has the most information of the citizen, we believe that allocation of resources is conducted in the best way. They can best allocate resources based on the number of populace living in each region and number of the severity of the situation on the ground. No, thank you. But second reason is that because local government knows about the culture most, we believe that for example, Burmese government knows that how Burmese people do not know how to use things like injection. We believe that if their consent exists, the servants will be there and can provide instruction to these people. And we believe that these resources of emergency aid will be best used under the consent of the local government. Yes.
Would that problem not be solved if you change the equipment you use, or if you add a translation to the way you use these apps?
No. We believe that this is an inevitable differences in terms of the asymmetrical information between Western government, no, thank you, and this local government. Now let's move on to our next point, which is about how local government will actively reject the aid from Western nations after taking this proposal. Well, when Western countries start to intervene in these countries without the consent, we believe that this will actually exacerbate the distrust amongst people to the local government, right? Because it looks like government is useless in the eyes of people. And given that the types of places that we are talking about, like countries like Burma, are still fragile society, and there are like in no way functioning democracy, like without stable political system, we believe that distrust to the local government is what this local government hates the most. We believe that there are two harms attached to that. First of all, it could potentially lead to military retaliation, which will further exacerbate the situation on the ground. Like I said in my introduction, Burma actually tried to shoot down the aircraft of the United States when they intervened without the consent. We believe that it is actually likely to lead to military action if it happens again. Well, like another example is that please imagine like disaster happens in certain areas in China and United States, like actually intervene without consent. We believe that will lead to the dangerous situation. But second reason is that this local government will start to actively block this country because they do not like to see West like playing a huge role in their borders, right? Because we believe that actually that was considered from the Prime Minister because that will lead to the distrust of the government. We believe that because this undermines the effort of emergency aid, and this emergency aid is delivered best when consent exists, we are very proud to oppose.
I thank the Leader of Opposition. Next, I'd like to call upon Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Ryotaro Tanaka from the Axis of Worldwide to deliver your speech within 7 minutes. You're here.
As my partner clearly and wonderfully explained, sovereignty does not come out of nowhere. Sovereignty exists because of entrustment of citizens. Entrustment of citizens to the government to protect citizens, Mr. Speaker. When the government betrays that entrustment, we, like international community, has legitimate interest and justification to intervene and protect people whose fundamental right to live is violated. And also we view this proposal as an extremely effective way of protecting these people by changing the incentive and by actually providing like aid to the people, and that's why we are very proud to propose this motion. Now the second speaker from the government bench, what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to refute what the previous speaker said. And second, I'm going to answer the question like Uchiyama has raised. Uchiyama said, okay, if accepting aid is so easy for like targeted nation, why targeted nation are not doing like accepting the aid? I'm going to explain why currently these countries are not accepting aid and how after plan action that calculus is going to change. First, refutation. First of all, Yoshiyamaru said, basically under CS law, the situation is we have functioning regional body to like protect the people, right? We have ASEAN regional, like Asian regional body, like trying to provide aid to targeted country, Mr. Speaker. First of all, we are talking about the situation where that cooperation, that negotiation attempt failed, right, Mr. Speaker? If ASEAN actually succeeded in negotiation and providing necessary aid to the people, Mr. Speaker, we do not have any just reason to intervene, right? Now, secondly, Mr. Speaker, what is important if this proposal actually help this ASEAN organization, right, Mr. Speaker? After all, most of the ASEAN countries are part of UN, right, Mr. Speaker? Meaning that ASEAN and UN can cooperate, communicate information, and the point here, Mr. Speaker, after plan adoption, this ASEAN country will have much more bargaining chip, right, Mr. Speaker? Because after plan adoption, after implementing this policy, Mr. Speaker, meaning that ASEAN have this big bargaining chip that if you do not obey the order, you are going to face like military intervention. Mr. Speaker, that can be a huge bargaining chip, and that will change the calculus, and we will this actually help the ASEAN country better negotiate, and that is extremely important. Now, secondly, he talked about how local government have more information and how people cannot know how to use Western aid. First of all, Mr. Speaker, what is emergency aid? Do you really think? Do you really think that there's a difference between like ASEAN people and like American people in terms of how to eat food, or how to use clothes, or how to use shelter? Majority of emergency aid are these kind of basic commodity, and these basic commodity is vital to protect the lives of people, Mr. Speaker. Even the food can like save the people, Mr. Speaker. That is extremely important, and we don't really think his analysis is true. Now, even if Mr. Speaker, there might be some difficulty, Mr. Speaker. We believe that their analysis is not really true, because there's not always the case that these, targeted countries have complete information about the country, Mr. Speaker. When we are talking about Myanmar, or we are talking about many other developing nations where not necessarily administrative branch is functioning well, or local government does not have offices in every part of the city. Unlike in Japan, there's no registration system, Mr. Speaker. These local government might not know that information as well, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we have good satellite image, Mr. Speaker. We can know which region is suffering from flood, and we believe that the Western country can help that. Now, secondly, Mr. Speaker, and thirdly, Mr. Speaker, let's say in case these local government have information, can better help these people. What is crucial, Mr. Speaker, is first, Mr. Speaker, this proposal will create incentive for this government which have information which is capable of protecting people to protect people, Mr. Speaker. So we believe this proposal will protect people. And even if, Mr. Speaker, even if we accept that Western government is less capable compared with this local government which have a lot of information, still, Mr. Speaker, it is much better that there's no comparing the situation. Right, it's much better that some support are given to people than no support given, right, Mr. Speaker? So for these reasons, we believe that our model is much superior model. Now, thirdly, about the problem of conflict. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we believe there can be military intervention. But from the beginning, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, this proposal is extremely beneficial in terms of increasing the bargaining chip, meaning that from the beginning the possibility of military intervention is low, because local government is likely to change the stance. Military confrontation, the possibility is low. Now, secondly, as my partner has explained, this international community have much more sophisticated weapons and have much more sophisticated forces. They can just overwhelm the local government, and we believe that the casualty can be minimized. And thirdly, as my partner explained, this soldier who died as a result of military intervention is just a tool of that local government, a tool of the targeted country, Mr. Speaker. They are the part of the government, and we are talking about protecting innocent people. When we compare soldier, which is part of the government, and innocent people who is suffering, we believe that we should prioritize innocent people. For these reasons, we believe our proposal is much better, even in terms of casualty. Finally, about how this proposal changed the incentive. Why? Yes, true. Myanmar unreasonably refused to receive the aid from other countries, Mr. Speaker. That is true. But why is that? The reason, primary reason why Myanmar refused to accept aid from the international community is A, they did not want their citizens to know that the Myanmar government is not capable of protecting people. That's the first reason. Now, second, the Myanmar government do not want to get shamed by the fact that they are incapable, by the fact that they are incapable, and they have to get help from the international community. So, Mr. Speaker, we cannot really call this choice of refusing unreasonable under the status quo. Because, Mr. Speaker, calculus, let's look at the calculus. Okay, what is the harm that these regional government is going to get if they refuse to accept the aid? That is shame, and also citizens knowing that the local government does not have much, that might not have so much ability to protect people. But on the other hand, what is the benefit? On the other hand, even if you refuse, what is the punishment? It's international condemnation, and in some cases, like a small military sanction, Mr. Speaker. So the benefit of refusal is much greater than the harm of accepting the aid. But, Mr. Speaker, after explanation, what is going to happen, Mr. Speaker? Yes, if they accept aid, there might be anger. There might be people getting angry, or there might be shame or losing dignity. But, Mr. Speaker, on the other hand, we have massive harm. That is, this local government, being subjected to military intervention and completely defeated, Mr. Speaker. That is a huge harm, and that can change the calculus of the local government. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, this will be a very effective way of changing the incentive of these regional government. And we believe this proposal can lead to saving more people. And for these reasons, we are very proud to propose.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister. Next, I'd like to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition, Mr. Takeru Uchiyama, to deliver your speech within 7 minutes. Hear, hear.
In my speech, I'm going to explain to you why it is very important to get the consent of the local government and to deliver aid only through the local government and through the mediation of the local government. Unless we do so, we believe that there's going to be catastrophic harm. Before that, I have a number of responses to make to the previous speaker. Now, we told you the importance of maximizing the effectiveness of these aid efforts done by the Western country. Their response was that, well, we have satellite imageries, and that therefore we can maximize the effectiveness of aid through that way. The problem is, satellite imagery does not show the subtle difference of cultural difference between that particular country and Western country. Now they label this argument as kind of silly, but if it's a problem translation, then we can simply translate that word in Burmese or whatever that country. The thing is, it is true that might be true for languages, but people in Burma have probably never used things such as antibiotic. We need people in the local people to be able to teach the local people what antibiotic is and how to use antibiotic. We believe that person should necessarily be the people in the particular local country. Then their response, well, when a military intervene in this country, so that's necessarily going to be better. Now, first of all, we believe that they stand on a myth that Western have an absolute military superiority to threaten countries. We believe that this myth is false when you take a look at countries such as Vietnam, where the West has failed. When you take a look at countries such as Syria, where the West has failed, we don't think that this myth is necessarily true. But secondly, when you take a look at cases such as Burma, we believe that Burma has the support of the Chinese government. We don't think that they're going to be frightened by U.S. intervention or UN intervention because they have when they have the support of that huge of an actor. But furthermore, they talked about how this is necessarily going to increase the bargaining chip for the West, because the military, that we can necessarily threaten these countries, and these local government will necessarily have to accept these aid if we take this proposal. Now we say that by accepting aid, oftentimes what happens is that is going to be the local government is going to be labeled as being defeated by the West. Oftentimes it necessarily leads to massive criticism and even violent revolution within its own regime. What happens in North Korea probably after planned adoption is that if the Kim whatever he accepts this particular aid, what's going to happen is the military wing of that particular regime is going to criticize and violently try to overturn that particular government. We don't think that Kim Sung-won is going to take that particular risk. But secondly, as I said again, the West, we don't think that West has an overwhelming superiority when it comes to military. We believe that UN will still hesitate to military intervene, considering that there's a huge harm in terms of cost, huge harm in terms of humanitarian cost. But furthermore, in terms of experience, West knows the experience of Somalia. West knows the experience of Vietnam. We don't think West will be we'd be able to absolutely be confident in military intervening in these countries. But furthermore, the local government also knows this fact. The local government also knows that the West will hesitate, and the West has failed in the past. Therefore, we don't think that this threat will necessarily work. Finally, they said, even though we are trying to negotiate with this local country, or this local country will necessarily reject the assistance from the West because they want to empower themselves. Now, first of all, the reason why the local government will not accept this aid is not because of selfish reasons, Mr. Speaker. The reason why the Burmese government did not accept the aid from the United States is because in that time the United States was military sanctioning Burma, and the United States was labeling Burma as the enemy of the entire Western world. As a consequence of that, we believe there are legitimate reasons for this country to deny aid for this country. So, moving to the more important issue. Why is it important to assist the local to assist and provide aid only through the mediation of that local government? We say that when you send aid directly to the local people, it is seen as going to be a direct challenge and a direct threat to that local government's very authority. Because the local people are no longer going to depend on the government for protecting their life. They're going to depend on Western countries to protect their life. People will start ignoring to follow the order given by the government. People will start starting to follow the rules or the laws or the order of the police of the government. So what happened in Burma is that after the US started airdropping medical supplies and food supplies, what happened that people started ignoring the order of the government. People started going to places like government restriction zone in order to get particular aid. We believe that as a consequence of that, this increases the antipathy of local citizens towards the local government, and that is exactly why the government hesitates and that is why the government hesitates these kind of aid in the first place, because it propagates riot and violent demonstration, and even in the worst case, a regime change. So we say that for the local government, this is going to be seen as a challenge and a threat to their authority, and that is exactly why the government has an incentive. And as a consequence of that is exactly why, after planned adoption, the local government will violently oppose to foreign intervention. So I'm going to explain you the harms. Not yet. First of all, we believe this is going to instigate violent crackdown by the local government or the particular government authority. So what happened in Burma is that when the US airdropped aid and food supplies and medical supplies to the people, what happened is that local military junta, the local military regime, violently cracked down, imprisoned people who were seen to be using that particular aid. But what happened in Somalia is even worse. The local terrorist organization, Al-Shabaab, which was at that time controlling that particular area, started killing people who were seen as by using the aid of the Western country. We believe this is going to lead to further violent crackdown after clan adoption. But secondly, we say this is going to be used as a reverse propaganda to empower that particular government or own authority, because they would necessarily have an incentive to actively undermine the credibility of the Western country. So what happened in Burma once again is that the Burmese military junta, what happened is that they started poisoning the food which was airdropped and provided by the US. People ate this poisoned food, and what happened is the Burmese government conducted a reverse propaganda. They started saying that, hey look, the United States is trying to poison you and kill you, and that is why you have to follow our order except for following the Western order. We believe that it's particularly harmful in the case of Burma. That is going to happen under their proposal as well. So why do we think... Open.
About citizen anger, citizens also understand that the natural disaster is the act of God. Do you really think a citizen is going to be angry enough to overthrow the government, completely deny the legitimacy of a government, even when this natural disaster is...
What we're making is that this is going to incentivize and increase the antipathy of local government to the Western country, and that is the whole point that we were making. But furthermore, why do we think that getting the consent is much more better? Because the local government do have an incentive to provide aid to its own local country. When the aid is mediated through their own local government, because it is necessarily seen as empowering their own regime and necessarily increasing their own reputation and credibility. As a consequence of that, there's two benefits. It doesn't lead to violent crackdown by these potentially violent regime, which we believe is a massive benefit for this country. But secondly, we believe that it prevents these countries from conducting any reverse propaganda. They won't poison these food in order to further strengthen their own credibility and harm the credibility of the West. We believe that even though there might be taking a longer time in order to aid their people and save their people, we believe that ultimately that is going to lead to less deaths and more people being saved, and that is why we are very happy to oppose.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Now I'd like to move on to the Member of Government, Mr. Yuki Oka, to deliver your speech within 7 minutes. Hear, hear.
The problem with the opening houses is that they've done a good job and great debate, but the fact is it's all very vague. Closing government is really going to ground it into the ground and tell you most specifically why we need to do so in cases of natural disasters. But before that, I've got a lot of refutes to opening opposition because they speak so fast, like Tommy Nagakan over there. Number one, the fact is they say negotiation is the best, that getting consent is important. But the fact is, there are many types of government that exist in our society. There are many types of this international union that exists. Maybe it worked in Burma with ASEAN, but what if a problem happens in an African nation that doesn't have a good local government? Will the African Union or the SUDC or something like that? Will the SFDC something? The fact is, will they have the capability to actually get the consent needed and get the necessary information from those local governments, which we already do recognize as being corrupt? We don't think that can happen. We think they've really narrowed down the debate to a situation which only benefits them, disregarding the other cases which does actually exist. Then they said the satellite is not good because it doesn't show cultural differences. The fact is, we're happy to then stop throwing medicine and food from the sky. We're happy to go with trucks, have people give it out personally, hand to hand. If that solves the problem, we're really happy to do that. You know, we can have classes to teach how to eat, if that's not what you're saying. We're happy to have classes to teach how to use these necessary equipment. We don't think that's really a problem at all. We can really solve that. Then they said about the military will go over that the UN will have hesitations because they have the examples of Somalia and Vietnam. The fact is, because we've experienced failures, we know what to avoid. Because we had failures in the past, we know what not to do, we know what should have been done, and we know what to do, therefore, in the next time we go on to do it. So we think it's naturally even better that we have experience of failure in the past. But moreover, the intelligence that these Western nations or the UN have compared to the military wing of that they said of these small nations are completely indifferent to the point that I don't think they will still fear the military coming in. Then they said that, what did they say? They said that there's going to be lots of harms because, number one, it's going to turn the people against the local government and challenge the authority. The fact is, the people are suffering and the government is ignoring them. Let them be angry at the government because that's what the government's supposed to be doing, to give help to these people. If they're not doing that, then it's the government's fault and they should look back at themselves and change their attitude. Moreover, we think it's a short-term harm compared to the harms that will keep on going if we don't give the help to these people. So we don't think that's really a problem. And then finally they said terrorist organizations, Al-Shabaab, and then poisoning. The fact is, the harms coming from those scenarios are seriously much smaller compared to the harms of the natural disaster itself, compared to those people who have died, compared to those people who have lost their homes, who have lost shelter, lost food, lost help, lost any hope for the future. People are displaced internally without anywhere to go. They're suffering, they will continue to suffer. The massive amounts of people that suffer is incomparable to the small amounts of number that they have told us under their paradigm. We don't think that's really a valid argument. Yeah.
That all the benefits to the people that you are talking about is predicated on the assumption that military intervention will result in success in countries like, for example, Somalia. Please explain how.
What we want to do is not military intervention. We want the government to change their attitude and accept the aid that comes in, the emergency aid. If they do accept it, then military intervention will not happen, so bye-bye your POI. Now, the first thing we need to recognize is that natural disasters, what are they? The biggest characteristic of natural disasters is simply that they're unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to happen. You don't even see it a week before it happens. I think you remember 3/11, the earthquake. What were you doing the day before that, on 3/10? You were living your normal life. You weren't expecting anything to happen. You weren't expecting a year, 2 years of chaos to follow on from that. These natural disasters are really unpredictable, and the fact that it happens inside that state, inside that nation as well. The problem is, it also damages the government which is inside that nation. It also damages the government buildings and the infrastructure that exists inside that nation. And therefore, we uniquely need an outer force to be able to give help, to be able to help the people who are also suffering. We allow it to happen in cases of crimes against humanity, and in my next point I'm going to tell you why the government refusing the aid is tantamount to crimes against humanity in the first place. So, Tanaka-san really flagged the point, but I'm really going to go deeper into it and tell you why the government really say refuses. It's because they conceal the incapability, yes, but the reason why they want to do that is because the ruling party still wants to be the ruling party afterwards. They still want to have the power inside that nation. They still want to be in the position of power. Therefore, they want to be seen as doing the good things. They want to be seen as trying to help. The way they do that, though, is a really bad way. They manipulate the media. They manipulate the information that goes onto the media. Take the case of Sri Lanka and the way they stop journalists from going into the area of disasters. That is simply going to happen in areas which don't really recognize journalism and freedom of speech and media. We think that it's, or even in Japan, you know, the case of nuclear, we had the government simply keep on saying it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, just to look as though they're doing the right thing. We think this kind of negligence, not giving information out to the public, not giving people enough information about their needs and what their situation is really tantamount to crimes against humanity in the sense that they're keeping these people unaware, they're keeping these people intentionally without the information they need, and we think that kind of negligence can be changed with our paradigm. As opening government told you, we're going to have military intervention, as I said in my refutations, it's going to be a really unique way to change the attitudes of these people. But moreover, we're going to have the people on our side. The people are going to know that we're going to do this, and as seen in the cases of Arab Spring, when we have a majority of the citizens united against the government, then we think it goes about to changing the attitudes of the government into a better way. That's why we can get the emergency aid quicker to the people and directly to the people and stop the suffering of these people. Finally, emergency aid, we need to recognize it's food, water, medicine. It's better than ODA or any other types of aid that we can give, uniquely because it's less likely to be abused than the aid in itself. By giving it directly to them, by giving it directly to the people, it's something that the people can really receive the benefit in the short term. That's why with other cases of aid, it just goes through a different third party, which is the government, which usually is corrupt in these cases. So at the end of the day, we're the ones that really told you uniquely to the motion why specifically in cases of natural disasters we need to take this motion. And that's why we're very proud to oppose.
I thank the member of government. Next, I'd like to call upon the member of opposition, Ms. Junko Nakano, to deliver your speech within 7 minutes. You're here.
Madam Chair, who has to live together and who has to face the whole consequences of natural disaster and irresponsible intervention of these threats. We say they are the most vulnerable, weakest citizens that has to take so. And Mr. Speaker, because of today's oral broadly explained firstly, the basic importance of the consent, and secondly, the possibility of the harm that occurs. As an extension, as a closing opportunity, we would like to clarify the incentive of the West to give the aid and how it is not going to be helpful for those citizens. And secondly, we would like to talk about the mechanism, how harmful the consequences occur. Okay, introducing an example saying, firstly, a rise of the guerrilla tension, or secondly, how the situation would be like Somalia, how disaster then it will be just only having the natural disaster. But before that, let me repeat to the previous speaker. So Oka came up and said, okay, natural disaster is something unpredictable. And so it is something happened inside the state. And the government is incapable, so you need external power. However, if she didn't explain the mechanism, how after taking a proposal, the consequences are going to be better off to the citizen. And moreover, Madam Speaker, if that consequence he had to manipulate media is true, it is also going to happen after the taking proposal. Even though the United States may send the army to help the people to hand in the aid hands to hand, the government would actually manipulate the media saying, okay, there is going to be the poison on that side. So in this way, the chaos will be increased and the who will get the harm of the most vulnerable citizens who don't have specific information, and we say this is totally harmful. So let me move on to my substantive. So Madam Chair, sit down. Madam Chair, why are West giving the aid? Because they have a lot of money, or because they are very generous? No, we don't think so. Because maybe it might be the financial incentive that that country may have, the oil or whatever. It might be the political reason to do so. Or maybe because by sending the aid to these people, they will look nice. And how is this looking nice important for those, let's say, US government? Because they can appeal to their own citizens. In this way, by sending some military to, let's say, Somalia, the opinion poll will go up. And this is the all incentive they are sending with them. So actually, because they have incentives like that, they have no 5 or 10 years long supporting plan to reconstruct that country. And we say we do not know when the US government is going to come. Whenever the opinion polls go down, or whenever they see criticism coming from the country, they have no responsibility to continue on that case, and we say it's totally impossible. So sit down. So in short term, maybe superficially, some people might be saved. However, Mr. Speaker, because they totally lack in long term, it is going to give the tangible harm to the innocent citizens. So let's start with first scenario. When, as the Kosaki-san had said, when the United States sends a military and it has some conflict within that country, let's say they have some kind of, they have to fight against some people, and they say, let's say some US military die in this case. In this case, because there's going to be clear criticism from the inside the country, as happened in Iraq War, as happened in the Vietnam War. So the government has no way to withdraw the military in order to keep the opinion poll high. So after taking under this scenario, that's kind of only the temporary aid of, let's say, 1 or 2 months will remain, and that is not going to help citizens, because the temporary aid of 1 or 2 months is not going to be able to sustain the table, not being able to plan the long-term reconstruction for the citizen. The citizen won't feel safe, no more confusion, or they still have the possibility of being raped in that confusion. The US did nothing in this way. In this scenario, the US military did nothing but to confuse that situation, and the US military actually used it as a propaganda, as a tool to to show the nice things, of which consequences they are not taking responsibility.
Point.
Sit down. So then let me go off with the second scenario. Because the United States military is going there without the consent of the country, they are not giving the information by, let's say, Sri Lanka, what kind of the geography they have, what kind of people are living in there. And why is specific information important? Because in some regions, as Uchiyama-san had kind of implied, there are some reasons why the military, that original government doesn't give the aid to that particular people. Maybe it might be some guerrilla which is very threatening the ordinary citizen living in there, and that might be the reason to not to give the aid to these people. However, but still taking possible because the West doesn't know this consequence, or West doesn't care, they just want to look nice. Yeah. So after taking possible, what is happening as a consequence? So firstly, the guerrilla is likely to be empowered. They cannot differentiate it for the area. They just look like a same disaster victim, so they will just give it irresponsibly. And after, moreover, Mr. Speaker, because the guerrilla is giving the aid by the West, actually they will politicize that area as well, saying, okay, even though the original will of the West was to help the ordinary citizen. However, Gary will be saying, okay, West is supporting our Tamil Tiger. How nice is that? In this way, the West will is being politicized, and we say this is totally harmful. And secondly, as a consequence, because in the case the guerrilla is empowered, it is actually going to activate them, right? So it's because they are going to activate and radicalize, actually they're going to start gunfire with the ordinary citizen. And as a consequence, it will delay the reconstruction to afford the shelter for the innocent citizen or the children to have the food, and in this way the infrastructure which they would have liked to protect is going to get slow to reconstruct, and we say it is incredibly harmful closing.
The fact is, those guerrilla fighters are suffering from the same effect of the natural disasters as we speak. Then why are they going to have the incentives to try and get power when they actually need to have something to survive in the first place?
Because the West is not capable of seeing how much aid they can, to what extent they can provide aid in order to keep the good balance with the guerrilla and not guerrilla. And Mr. Speaker, moreover, we say these kinds of the fundamental infringement for the human rights is actually being minimized because if the original country never ever gives that aid to particular area of people, then there's going to be a clear criticism towards that country, and in this way the harm is being minimized. So let me continue on. So after taking proposal, who is most likely to get harmed? So after taking proposal, we say it is the most innocent citizen, the vulnerable, the most citizen who has no way to speak up, who has no way to help themselves. So after the irresponsible withdrawal, or after the being politicized with this country, what is going to happen? So let's take example Myanmar once again. It's the United States sends up a military, and because of the criticism under this United States military withdrawal, what is going to happen? It is the citizen who will be oppressed from that Myanmar government, saying, okay, you got the aid from the West, you're not our side, so as a sanction, we're not going to support you anymore. And in this way, the oppression will exacerbate, and they have to acknowledge this harm, in addition to the harm they are having from the natural disaster. So in either context, we say that we are not saving the innocent citizen, and we say this critical harmful going under will against this. So we say we oppose this motion.
I thank the member of opposition. Next, I'd like to call upon the government with Mr. Mitsushi Ono to deliver your speech within 7 minutes. Here.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, 2 key clarifications before moving on to the summarization of this debate. First of all, after hearing or listening to their speeches, we haven't heard any constructive measure to deal with the problem in which that 100,000 people are suffering from the natural disaster. Just because we are worried about small disadvantage, which is not really unique to the motion, that's not the reason to oppose the motion in the first place. They need to show why keeping the status quo or opposing the motion will bring better consequence for vast majority of people who are suffering in those targeted countries in the first place. Second of all, after listening to their speech, we don't see any counter principle to respect the sovereignty of dysfunctional state in the first place. In case of particularly natural disaster, we believe the sovereignty should be limited for the reasons my partner have given you. I'm going to further extend that. I'm going to talk about three key arguments. First of all, what's the context of this debate? Well, what kind of characteristic of the targeted country we are talking about? Second of all, what's the unique nature of natural disaster? That's the uniqueness of motion. Really, no one really talks about it. Third of all, what's the practical outcome? First of all, what's the way in which we understand the characterization of the government or regime in targeted countries? When we try to deliver the emergency aid, vast majority of the case, targeted countries can't deal with the problem by themselves, right? If they are capable of doing that, we don't deliver the aid in the first place, right? In vast majority of the case, we deliver the aid. In those cases, the targeted countries can't deal with the problem themselves. What's the response coming from that side of the house? From the opening opposition, let's use regional body because that's very fantastic organization as an intermediator to deliver the aid. Please consider the relation between Zimbabwe and SADC. We don't think the relation is amicable in the first place. We don't think SADC has actual capability to effectively deliver the aid to those African countries in the first place. We can say the same things from ASEAN and like Myanmar or Thailand, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think those regional organizations have any capability to deliver the aid in a most effective way or efficient way. Moreover, what we have from the closing opposition was not really, it's not really relevant to the motion. First world nation will have the perverse financial or political incentive when they deliver the aid to targeted countries. We have several responses. First of all, if their logic is true, I think they are opposing any aid or any intervention, not specifically the motion in the first place. No, thank you. We don't know whether political opinion poll will raise or decrease when their government give aid to other countries, right? Obviously, vast majority of people inside want their government to use their money to themselves, not spending aid for people living outside, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, their analysis is factually wrong in the first place. No, thank you. But just because Western countries lose the political popularity doesn't legitimize the perpetuation of the harm in which 100,000 people are dying in other countries, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think why the argument legitimizes opposing the motion. Fourthly, even if one nation like the United States will lose the political incentive, political will to undertake intervention or continue intervention in targeted countries, but what we're talking about today is multinational or bilateral intervention, not talking about just one country giving this kind of delivering emergency aid. We're talking about many countries are getting involved in this kind of process. So even if one country will lose political will to undertake intervention, it doesn't automatically mean our proposal will never work in the first place. All the harm coming from that side of the house is very short-sighted, right? The people inside the African countries will ignore their own government. Instead, they will obey the SADC or African Union. But after occupation force withdraw, those people will have no other option but to rely on their own regimes. So the harm coming from that side of the house is very short-sighted. Moving on to the second issue. What's the way in which we understand the uniqueness of natural disaster? This debate is clearly about the natural disaster, ladies and gentlemen. It's unpredictable in the first place. Government or targeted countries can't deal with the problem by themselves. We uniquely need the external help. This is the same as basic principle of any intervention. When the countries can't deal with the problem of, let's say, corruption or crimes against humanity given by dictator, when the countries can't deal with the problem by themselves, it's necessary or legitimize the usage of the external help. This is exactly the same. The only reason coming from that side of the house is we are not sure whether practically this will be beneficial or not. But this principle is not predicated on a practical consequence. The fact that the government can't deal with the problem is self-legitimized use of external force. Therefore, this is a clear principle. Moreover, the unique characteristic of those government or targeted countries, they have perverse political incentive to conceal the incapability of their regime in order to win the next election in the first place. We believe those government or regime in targeted countries are actively manipulating the public discourse, actively concealing the information, ladies and gentlemen. We believe this kind of intention of those regimes are tantamount to crimes against humanity, because those countries have active incentive to perpetuate the harm caused by natural disaster by concealing their corruption or their incapability. No, thank you. Actually, yes.
Now, if the local government mediates these kind of aid which comes from the West and help people, that empowers their credibility. They have incentive to accept. The reason why the US didn't get the consent of Burma is because they didn't want to empower the local government. Don't you think that's a little bit selfish for the West?
No, we don't think so. First of all, your assumption is that why the regional governments have always capability to intermediate the use of AIDS. We doubt that in the first place. We analyze the relation between the vast majority of African countries in the South African Development Union or African Union. We don't think those regional organizations have an amicable relation with those surrounding countries in the first place. Therefore, in this particular scenario, because a natural disaster is uniquely related to the corruption of the government or active intention to deal and conceal the incapability to deal with the problem, that should be tantamount to crimes against humanity, which legitimizes the intervention by the external factors, external countries. Finally, the outcome of this debate. Their harm is predicated on assumption. What they say is intervention is not likely to work. It might fail. If our policy fails, then all the harms coming from that side of the house doesn't stand in the first place. Therefore, that's ridiculous for them to claim that. Moreover, in the case of guerrilla, we are happy to allow CIA to gather information about the location of guerrilla. If that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen, all the harm coming from that side of the house is not really intrinsic or unique to the motion. So let's compare the harm they propose and we propose. In terms of quantity, right? The number of people who are suffering from the harm caused by that sort of harm is very small in comparison with the number of people who are suffering from the natural disaster. We're talking about 100,000 people are dying because of the hurricane or earthquake. Moreover, in terms of long term, their harm is very short-sighted, right? If the occupational force withdraw or retreat, then their harm will stop. But our proposal, under their paradigm, they're going to perpetuate the situation where people are dying. We are happy to propose. Thank you.
Government whip. Last but not least, I'd like to call upon the opposition whip, Mr. Takanori Hayashi, to deliver your speech within 7 minutes. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, proposition side impose unreasonable burden on the opposition side, Mr. Speaker. They said that our burden is to prove why status quo is perfectly okay. It's not our burden, Mr. Speaker. The burden of our side of the House is why, after taking this proposal, it's gonna be much more disastrous, that involved more citizens in a much more severe scale and harms, Mr. Speaker. So, our side of the House is the one that contributes to prove this outcome by showing the clear incentive of the Western country to not to conduct the full amount of aid. Secondly, we provide you a clear mechanism which never be doubted by the side government why it's gonna be how it's gonna be much more exacerbated. So moving on to my criteria, I have two things to talk about. Firstly, I'd like to talk about do we need the consent in the first place. Secondly, I'd like to talk about in which scenario disaster area would be, and the country would be better off. So moving on to the first of all. So do we need the consent in the first place? Opening government came up and said a very kind of general idea, right? So there's an abuse of human rights and a very disastrous situation and we need to do that. But it's not the reasons to directly justify any sort of intervention towards the country, Mr. Speaker, like opening opposition said. Secondly, closing government came up and said two things. First of all, this recipient country or disaster-getting country are incapable to deal with the situation, Mr. Speaker, but we don't think so. So in the case of Indonesia or in the case of Sri Lanka, even though this country had the capacity, had the monetary capacity, technological capacity to restore those areas, Mr. Speaker, just because it's political reason, because they're concerned about the entire security of the country, they're concerning about they happen to empower the nationalistic group or ethnic group who might distort the social order in the first place. So these countries are intentionally actually do so. These countries have the capability to deal with the problem itself. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, they told us that negligence is a crime against humanity, but we don't see any sort of example why this kind of negligence or refusing the aid doesn't would ultimately lead this as a crime against humanity in the first place. We see no mechanism whatsoever. As long as closing opposition will tell you that these people have the unique high class reflecting the unique conditions that this country has. So, for example, regarding the terrorism or regarding the independence movement that threatened the security of the countries never be understood by the West, Mr. Speaker. We need the consent in the first place. Moving on to the second one.
Engagement.
No. So in which scenario disaster area would be better off? So opening government and closing government came up and said totally the same thing. We can change those countries' stance with more liberalized, more willing to accept this aid. But first of all, it's not true, Mr. Speaker. As the opening opposition said, that there's a huge ideological problem, or they see the terrorism group or other group as a huge problem in the society. These people are actually extremely hard for them to make those countries to open the gate. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we clearly told you why it's going to be difficult and harmful to change the mind of the government by mobilizing the citizen. First of all, Mr. Speaker, proposition side never showed why actually we can change the system of the country just because we certainly mobilize the individual. Even though we see certain demonstration on the ground, Mr. Speaker, we see no change in the country as a whole. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, that we say. That we see the Arab Spring country or very successful mechanism, whatever, but how many countries actually succeed in terms of Arab Spring in the first place, Mr. Speaker? Only several countries, the vast majority of countries are facing the huge difficulty to overcome the oppressive regime, to overcome the situation that is made by the top of the regime, Mr. Speaker.
Point.
No, thank you. So, therefore, we still see the Syria, we still see the Bahrain actually oppressing the individual that have the stick mind, never have the incentive to concede it. Third of all, Mr. Speaker, even though we can achieve certain change, Mr. Speaker, but we have to sacrifice a lot of citizens, Mr. Speaker, because we have to mobilize the masses to go to the demonstration, which can be the target of military attack, which we see the Syria, which we see Egypt, Mr. Speaker. We say we can sacrifice the thousands of citizens would be killed. So, secondly, before that, no, thank you. So we told you, as a closing opposition, we told you the very good extension. First of all, Mr. Speaker, we are the only one that draw the incentive or political incentive of those people, Mr. Speaker. Those people are not based on the genuine will. These people are based on the pragmatic reason that try to empower the regime of the United States, that try to empower the regime, that try to get more opinion poll. So Mitsushi came up and said that the individuals are actually opposing those people, opposing the government action to send the money to the foreign countries. But it's actually not, Mr. Speaker. When in Japan, we had a very, very big disaster that actually Taiwanese people or Chinese people or Mongolian people are willing to give the money to the Japan in the first place, Mr. Speaker. We say if this individual in the Western country or other liberal democracy are innocent, are just recognizing the harm on that country, and these people are willingly and innocently support this action in the first place. No, thank you. So, secondly, we told you that terrorism, Mr. Speaker, why terrorism would arise. First of all, Mr. Speaker, we are actually empowering those individuals to have the necessary equipment to sustain their community. I'm sorry. And sustain their... okay.
We don't need... okay. We don't... Okay, do you really think just by the mere fact that the government does not have enough resources to support citizens, do you really think the citizen is going to be angry enough to overthrow the regime? If not, don't you think the government has incentive to change the stance?
No, sorry. So because of the existence of aid, Mr. Speaker, the individual citizen on the ground, not only the citizen, not only the terrorist member, but also other general individual, will see the highlighted difference between the recipient country, the country on the ground and the aid giving country, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, in the status quo, we see the huge arise of antipathy that after taking this proposal, we see huge arise of antipathy that leads the demonstration, that leads the violent backlashes, that leads to more terrorism that affect entire country, not only the some disaster area. Maybe not the last extension. So why it's gonna be a huge possibility to lose, Mr. Speaker? Because after taking this proposal, that if a military conflict happen and if there is a huge difficulty like Vietnam War and kind of stuff, opinion poll will suddenly go down, and if the United States will withdraw, other country will likely to be targeted as a victim, Mr. Speaker. We are the one who told you the better situation for the innocent individual on the ground we have to cause.